What's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson, joined by my co host, Collin Alcaves. And today we're going to be having a little bit of a speculative discussion. Towards the end of the 2022-2023 season, everyone knew that Patrick Kane was most likely going to be a 1 year rental. He was really there on the lineup to just boost the roster enough to propel us to the Stanley Cup finals. Didn't happen, right? So Tarasenko, same story with him. He ended up re-signing elsewhere in Ottawa. And Patrick Kane is still kind of just in hockey limbo right now. After the season concluded, it was revealed that Kane had been playing through an injury for most of the season, and that kind of really held him back. Not many teams are super interested in signing like a veteran forward as old as Kane, who has been dealing with injuries and comes at a pretty hefty price. But there are some rumors going around, some predictions by some pretty famous NHL reporters and analysts saying that Kane does still want to remain a New York Ranger. He does have ties to a few other teams as well. But today, me and Collin are really just going to dive into this whole situation, see if it's even possible for the Rangers to re-sign Patrick Kane, or if they could, should, or will do it. So before we really get into it, Collin, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I can't complain. Patrick Kane is always one of my favorite topics to talk about, so I'll never shy away from a topic like this, even though not everybody's going to be as eager as I am to talk about it.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely one of those controversial situations where a lot of Rangers fans really wanted the Rangers to acquire Kane, and Chris Drury pulled off some magic, made it happen, but then it ended up being one of the more underwhelming moves throughout Chris Drury's general managership. So who knows what's going to happen in the future? But before we really talk about should the Rangers do it, should they not do it? Let's just the first question right off the bat is, can the Rangers do it, right? You look at the roster that we have just after signing Alexi Lafreniere to a 2 year extension. The Rangers currently sit $50,000 over the salary cap. So before the season even really gets underway, the Rangers are going to have to make a first adjustment to just make sure that they're playing at like a legal level of money spending. So if they just even consider Kane coming back, like what kind of contract do you see Kane signing, whether it be with the Rangers or wherever he lands? Like how much money do you think he's going to be making?
I see him going wherever he goes. It'll be a short deal, 1 or 2 years, just to prove his worth again. I think he's going to have a big bounce back year coming off of injury. If you look at his stats the year prior, I mean, he had 92 points in 78 games with a very bad Blackhawks team. And even last year, he had 57 points in 73 games overall throughout the season, playing injured, and for most of the season on, again, a very bad Blackhawks team. I think no matter where he goes, he'll get an opportunity to play. I think it'll look like my estimate would be like a 2 year, around $4 million average, unless he's willing to take a discount.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. Like Patrick Kane is getting towards the end of his career. He's 34 years old. So he's at the point where, age is going to start really becoming a factor. He's not fully washed yet. Obviously, he's Patrick Kane, arguably the greatest American born player of all time in the NHL, in my opinion, at least. But I think you're right. He does have another good year or two in him, especially coming off of that injury. I think it was one of those things watching him play for the Rangers, although it was only 19 games throughout the regular season and then another 7 in the postseason. It was slightly underwhelming. A lot of Rangers fans expected him and Panarin to have that instant click with chemistry like they did all the way back a couple seasons ago in Chicago. But no, there really wasn't that quick of an adjustment. And I think a large portion of that had to do with the fact that Kane was injured. But Kane has recently said, talking to media, that he has had his surgery. He's feeling better, feeling like himself, and he's ready and eager to hit the ice. So hopefully, if it is with the Rangers, with another team, Patrick Kane will be back in form. But I do think that you have a pretty good estimate on that deal. 2 years, around $4 million. But despite that being like somewhat of a low number for Patrick Kane, that's still a lot of money. And the Rangers would have to clear that up. So I know there are a couple of names out there like Barclay Goodrow. He's possibly on the trade block for the Rangers. Hasn't really produced that much. Definitely a little bit of a liability, and he's extremely overpaid. Goodrow is making about $3.5 million for the next 4 or 5 years. I don't know exactly how long it is, but it's definitely a long time. So if I had to trade away a player to make money for Kane, Goodrow's number one on my list. I don't know if you agree or if you have any other names, players you might be willing to move on from.
I would say that's honestly one of the only players that come to mind. Trying to give $3.6 million to a bottom six, most likely a fourth line player, to justify it It just doesn't make sense to me. I really didn't love that deal from the start. And, Kane has expressed his interest in the breakdown at the end of last year that he would like to stay with the Rangers. Obviously, he's been linked to other teams such as like the Detroit Red Wings because he likes to play with Alex DeBrincat, as we all would wish to. But he's made his desires clear that he would like to come back, and I think if Drury can move Gaudreau, I don't think it's completely unreasonable that he takes a little bit of a discount and comes back to New York and gives it another go. I think he's disappointed with how he played. I think he knows the fans are disappointed, even though honestly, looking at the stats now, in retrospect, not that bad. 6 points in 7 playoff games, I'll take that all day. 12 points in 19 playoff games. I think he just wasn't as flashy as we expected him to be. He wasn't Showtime necessarily, but he was still a solid player. So I as much as that production doesn't scream Patrick Kane, I think those numbers will go up, and I think no matter where he lands, he's gonna bounce back for sure.
Yeah, and you also have to consider the fact that he was playing on a new team for like literally the first time throughout his very, very lengthy career. He did play pretty solid, 12 points in 19 regular season games right there. That's not bad by any means. That's a lot better than a lot of current Rangers forwards can say that they've played. Cough, cough, Alexis Lafreniere. But no, like it does make sense. An older player finding a new team, you're not going to expect them to fit in and find that groove right away. And, a lot of, especially like me and Anthony and a lot of other Rangers fans, were really expecting that chemistry click between him and Panarin once again. But then once you consider the fact that it's been like a good 5 seasons since they've played together, that still does take time to build up right there. So I think seeing a full season of maybe Patrick Kane and Artemi Panarin together might help build that up. And I do think that a full season with the Rangers would definitely benefit Kane rather than just a little bit of a stint right there. But speaking of just like the signing, when it would even possibly happen, Arthur Staple predicts that he's going to re-sign with the Rangers in November. So, if that happens, he wouldn't get a full season with the Rangers. But as we kind of went over, the Rangers do have to work with a little bit of cap right there. Kane claims that he's back and ready to go, but, another month or two certainly wouldn't hurt bringing him back, getting him into practice and stuff right there. So I don't know. It's definitely possible. Drury would have to work out a couple more kinks to make it happen, but he did it once in a lot more meticulous and impossible way. So I don't think it'd be too hard or too difficult to make it happen this year as well. But just the fact that it's possible, does it mean that we should do it? Like if you're Chris Drury right now and Patrick Kane's like right here, I'll sign for like a 2x4 contract right now, are you going to take it?
Honestly, looking at the team, looking at the player, and looking at the fact that you don't have to give up the assets, I think it's a high risk, but also very high reward. I think if you do this, obviously you're guaranteeing yourself no moves at the deadline, but maybe that's better. You don't have to give up any draft capital, any future players. You get to keep the prospect pool together. So you're not giving up any assets, and you're getting a guy with high 50s, low 60 potential at his worst, because that's what he was last season. I'll take that all day. We just did that with Blake Wheeler, obviously on a much cheaper deal, but to get that kind of production without having to give up anything, I think that speaks volumes, other than money, of course.
And then now let's say Chris Drury does go out there and make this signing. Like, where do you see Kane fitting in? Are you going to try to run back the Kane Panarin duo? Or do you want to maybe to have him take Kakko's projected spot on the first line with Kreider and Zibanejad? Because just looking at it right now, I like seeing Kakko up on that first line. I think he's going to succeed very well alongside Kreider and Zibanejad. And I feel like Kane would fit better with Panarin and Trocheck, or possibly Hedl, whoever the center is. So I personally would have him on that second line right there, and then have Blake Wheeler add to that bottom six depth. But I'm curious to know where you would slot him right in.
So in the projected lines that I made up last night when I was reading about the Arthur Staple article, I would not take Kakko off that first line. He's earned his spot. He played well. They were statistically one of the better lines in the league last year in both zones. For me, I would either try and rekindle that Panarin Kane connection with a longer time, but they're both not great defensively. So I looked at the lines of potentially Panarin, Hedl, and Kane. And if I don't love that, then I would just put him on call me crazy, I put Kane on the third line, and it would be Lafreniere, Trocheck, and Kane. And I bump Wheeler up to that second line because he's a little bit better defensively. And then you still get, a kid on each line, and you get two veterans on each line to kind of anchor the lines. I think that would probably be the best. because then you get a 1-2 punch on every line. You get Lafreniere, Kane, you get Panarin, Wheeler, you get Zibanejad and Kakko, and the centers down the middle. I mean, they're all interchangeable. But I'd like to see Hedl get some 2C time. So that, to me, would be the ideal lines if, you're not trying to make that rekindle the love between Panarin and Kane.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. It's a pretty crazy idea, Kane down in the bottom six, but like you have to at least acknowledge the positives that would come. Like you mentioned, every line would be extremely solid. It's not like your top six is just insane and the bottom six has no talent right there. You're having a future Hall of Famer down there on your third line right there, and then especially just Lafreniere, who's had struggles developing in the NHL, looking for that breakout season. If he's not going to be able to find opportunity to play up in the top six and receive more minutes, put him on a line with one of the greatest players of all time. And if that can't help him break out, then who knows?
If you look, honestly, it's reminiscent to when the Rangers acquired Marty St. Louis. Where did they put him? He wasn't playing. He was on the third line. I'm almost positive he was playing on that third line. And we went to a cup. You know what I mean? You need that depth, and that leadership for Lafreniere could honestly help unlock his ability. Playing with guys, he might not be getting the minutes, but he still gets that talent. Like the talent gap from the second to third line is usually a pretty steep drop off. But on this Rangers team, it would be solid throughout. Not to mention, it also gives Laviolette the ability to play with the lines a little bit. You know what I mean? You can put anybody anywhere, and you're deep through the first three, even the fourth line. I love it. Obviously, I wouldn't put any of those guys higher than the fourth line, but it gives you the ability to play with those first three lines and find a combination that might work better. So to me, it's like a very malleable lineup if you can acquire a player like that.
You're absolutely right there. I can't put it any better than that. So like before we just wrap things up, it's looking like based on predictions and what people have said, wherever Patrick Kane resigns, it's probably either going to be the Rangers or the Red Wings, right? The Rangers are probably willing to make it work, but you also have to assume that as soon as Steve Yzerman over in Detroit heard that Kane was eyeing them down, he's itching to make something happen. So just realistically, like, where do you see Kane happening? And we know the Rangers can make it happen. We know they may want to, but do you think it's going to happen, or is Kane and DeBrincat going to tear things up in Detroit?
I don't know. It's tough to tell, because I remember talking with you last year. Once the Rangers got Tarasenko, you're like, we're out on Kane. And I texted you, hey, we might still be in on Kane. And I floated that very, very early potential trade. And you're like, I could see it, but probably not. And then, lo and behold, it happened. And so, anything's possible, especially when you got Drury's GM. He manages to get everything done somehow, some way. So, it'll probably be the Red Wings, but never count the Rangers out. For some reason, they're always in it. They're always making the room and making things happen. And who wouldn't want to play for New York? I'll take the discount all day. Had a chance to win a cup. I think he has a better chance here than he does in Detroit.
That's fair. That's a perfect way to just wrap it up. Just never count the Rangers out. Chris Drury made it happen once. Who's to say he can't make it happen again? But until anything official is released, this is all just predictions and speculation. So if you guys want to stay updated on everything New York Rangers and Patrick Kane related, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We'll be sure to update you the second that anything happens regarding the New York Rangers. But until then, make sure you like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss a notification, and stay tuned for the next one. Have a good one, and
let's go Rangers.